Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining this Northshire Presents virtual event. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rachel Person, event manager for Northshire Bookstore in Saratoga Springs, New York, here with my good friend and colleague, Davith Wood, event manager for Northshire Bookstore in Manchester Center, Vermont. Before we get started with tonight's exciting Rep Picks event, we are going to be putting a link in the chat in just a couple of seconds. In fact, I'm going to put that there right now. Oh, Davith already did. He beat me to it. That includes all of the titles being discussed tonight for easy following along at home and also shopping after the fact. Also, please note that earlier is better in terms of holiday shopping this year. If you're wanting to place orders on our website, the sooner you can get those in, the better. It is getting busy in the store. I was there all day today and it was pretty crazy. So as early as you can place your orders, that really does help us out a lot, and also helps make sure that you get your hands on specific books, because reorders are tricky as ever this year. So please do that. Thank you so much for your incredible loyalty and support and for being here. All of us at Northshire are really grateful for that. We couldn't do what we do without all of you. So thank you so much. And Davith is going to introduce our guests tonight.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Well, first up, we've got our good friend Susie Albert from Penguin Random House Publisher Services. Susie represents a lot of small independent presses, and she was saying just before we got started, these are just as good as all the big authors, big books from Penguin Random House, except they just don't have money for marketing purposes. So Susie, please tell us a little bit about some of these books that you're going to share with us.
I would be happy to, and thank you so much for having me. So I am starting out with Dead End Memories because it's my very favorite book from our fall list. It's a collection of 5 short stories about women predominantly who are dealing with some sort of trauma like grief, loneliness, or change. Yet somehow these potentially heavy themes, despite these potentially heavy themes, the masterful writing style of the author, Banana Yoshimoto, avoids depressing and bleak prose. She infuses the stories instead with meaning and feeling that make them insightful and impactful. The book she's known most for is Kitchen, which was published way back in 2006, but I enjoyed this one much more in that it truly embodies what one reviewer said is her ability to write, quote, utterly without pretense, unquote. To me, her writing feels effortless. There's nothing contrived, her prose is perfect, and there are no wasted words or images. We're simply allowed in to experience a range of emotions like melancholy and glee, delight and horror, fear and bravery, despair, and ultimately hope. This was named one of the top 100 books by the New York Times for 2022. It's received starred reviews in our industry periodicals, and a bookseller in Seattle summed it up this way that I thought was great. The 5 stories in this collection are so reflective and ambient. I felt like I was right there with each narrative and breathing in the same air. Yoshimoto's writing makes the daily motions of life feel special, even in times of hardship. I inhaled this book, pleased to let my mind wander into each perspective, a warm, comforting jewel of a read in an absolutely beautiful, stunning package. And then next up is Kindred. So Kindred is part time travel, part horror, and all fabulous and inventive. I hadn't read anything by this trailblazing Black author until this book, and I was mesmerized. First of all, it was published back in 1979, but it feels still as fresh and new as anything written today. And it's still so sadly relevant as we have yet to make great gains in racial reconciliation or restitution for slavery. But in this mind-blowing story, which is being adapted into an 8-part series on Hulu, airing next week, December 13th, we go back on this strange and terrifying journey with modern-day Dana, who's thrust back in time to antebellum Maryland to save a white boy who's a distant relative from her past. The story moves between present day and life on the slave plantation, where Dana's white husband eventually joins her in living or trying to live or survive in this dual timeline. It's just riveting storytelling. I really could not put it down. And there is this just gorgeous gift edition, as well as the regular trade editions out in the market, and read it before you watch it. Aesthetica is another book with a dual timeline where the narrator of the story Anna Ray is looking back and recounting her experiences as an Instagram model / influencer at the age of 19, but also at the age of 35 as she prepares to undo all the plastic surgery she put herself through during the earlier years. When Anna moves from Houston to LA, she meets social media manager Jake online, and her life becomes one of constant alterations to her face. She gets breast implants, there's lots of drugs, sex, and lots of money. Suspense builds in each timeline as Anna describes the fraught relationships with both her sick mother and her friend who's a professional runner battling anorexia, as well as the choices Anna, is making for her influencer career. In the current timeline, the procedure called Aesthetica promises a return to her natural self as if she had never had the plastic surgery in the first place. Author Allie Rowbottom is the author of the book and an heiress of the Jell-O company. She herself lived much of her life in the spotlight on Instagram and purposely set out to mirror themes in this book via her posts on the platform. If you follow her, you can see it. The book is hard to pigeonhole. Some call it speculative fiction with elements of horror. And one blogger said it's a fill the void genre that happens to tackle deep philosophical inquiries about morals and personal choice. It kind of reads like a train wreck that you don't really want to witness, but you can't sort of look away. If you've read or you read or know people who like Ottessa Moshfegh, this would be a good book for them. And apparently books that have eyes that make eye contact sell books. The Strange Inheritance of Leah Fern is the next book. I can see if you can see it. Well, it's a great combination of magical realism, road trips, and found family. The book opens with Leah contemplating suicide on her 21st birthday after living as an outcast who was born to a magician in a circus. But Leah has the gift for fortune telling. Yet when her mom disappears one day when she's 6 years old, leaving her to be raised by a kindly older man in the circus, her gift of insight does not work, and she can't figure anything out about why her mother has gone. Her plan to take her life, though, is quickly quashed when a knock on the door delivers an inheritance of letters with instructions to travel around the country collecting answers about her mother. This is a feel-good, celebratory celebration of living story that's appropriate for older teens as well as adults. It's an easy read. You get invested emotionally from the start. And Leah's character is so well drawn, and she evolved so much during the book that you really want to find out the outcome. Also, it's a nice chunky paperback at $17.99. So I like a lot of pages for my book prices. According to Kelvin Baker, writing in The Atlantic, Gail Jones may be the best American novelist you've never heard of, whose name you might not know. She won the American Book Award Lifetime Achievement this year. Her book, Palmaris, was a Pulitzer Prize finalist. She's a 2-time National Book Award finalist, and she was discovered and edited by Toni Morrison. So here is her newest book, Birdcatcher, which refers to the name of a sculpture in the book. The story is set primarily on the island of Ibiza off the coast of Spain and narrated by writer Amanda Wordlaw, whose closest friend, a gifted sculptor named Catherine Sugar, is repeatedly institutionalized for trying to kill her husband, who never leaves her. The three form a quirky triangle on the whitewashed island. It's a story of Black American artists in exile. The dialogue is rhythmic and unusual, and the dynamic with the sculptor trying to kill her husband is truly bizarre, but it keeps you reading for sure. You'll laugh and you'll wince, but ultimately you'll be very glad that you read this very important, very elusive author. I read Confessions of Matthew Strong over 6 months ago, and I still haven't stopped thinking about it. In this psychological thriller, African-American professor Allie Douglas has just secured the chair of philosophy at her prestigious New York University. She studies the mind of slaveholders. But when her grandmother dies, she rushes down to her hometown of Birmingham, Alabama, and reunites with her sister and learns about the work that her grandmother and her friends had been doing to try to locate missing girls in the area. Allie is then kidnapped by the white supremacists responsible for the abductions. Matthew Strong, the supremacist, intends on starting a revolution to reclaim the South based on his crazed and manipulated interpretations of history. The relationship between the professor and her abductor is strangely respectful, which I found extremely troubling and very thought-provoking at the same time. The story is chilling, suspenseful, and moves fast, and I think it would be an excellent book for a book club to discuss. Check out this beauty in the Watkins Book of English Folktales. It has a foreword by Neil Gaiman, and unfortunately, we're not able to do what Philip Pullman suggested when he wrote, quote, "Collections of folktales as good as this should be treated in two ways. First, they should be bound in gold and brought out on ceremonial occasions as national treasures. And second, they should be printed in editions of hundreds of thousands at the public expense and given away for free to every young teacher and every new parent," unquote. But this beautiful tome is just under 400 pages and is so reasonably priced at $19.95 that it's almost like it's free. The version of Snow White in this one who's housed by three robbers, instead of seven dwarves, is sly and funny. And the other stories, some of which are familiar while many are not, creepy, fantastical, melancholy, and jolly good. Great package, great gift book. Moving over to some nonfiction, Pema Chodron has How We Live is How We Die. In this sage treatise, Buddhist nun Pema Chodron muses philosophically on life's transition. It's instruction, compassionate and welcoming, and works to ease fearful attitudes toward death and improve people's daily lives through spiritual renewal and release. Her clarity and warmth make this book accessible to a wide array of audiences. And since everyone on the planet has experienced so many endings since the pandemic started, Pema's words on living through groundlessness couldn't be more relevant. She's 86 years young, so hopefully we'll have many more books from this wise source. All right, in the home stretch. Cookbooks are flying off the shelves this season, and ATK, or America's Test Kitchen as they're known, ATK has tons of offerings, including this handy complete modern pantry. I personally love a good chunky paperback cookbook, and this one delivers on all burners. Trade breadcrumbs, because no two pantries are the same, every recipe gives you ideas for simple swaps. Trade breadcrumbs for toasted nuts when you just need something crunchy to finish a dish, and substitute soy sauce for Worcestershire for that umami boost. This is a great gift for college students or anyone looking for more tips on how to use what's on hand. And it's more up to date and way better looking than Mark Bittman's Kitchen Matrix, which I also own. And it's double the page count of Ottolenghi's Shelf Love at almost the same retail price. Nice chunky paperback. And I had to give you a couple of little stocking stuffers, we'll put them the right direction. If you've seen these before, that's great. They're backlist books that have been around for a while, but I had to just mention them because I love these books so much, by Helen Thurston. The stories are about Maud, who's an irascible 88-year-old Swedish woman with no friends, no families, and no qualms about a little murder. These are perfect time killers. See what I did there? Between the gift orgy and the arrival of the meal. They're so much fun. You might want to read them aloud to share the hilarity, or escape to a cozy place where you can gleefully snigger in private. Enjoy a bit of mirth with your murder, and they fit in a stocking. And lastly, and I don't have a slide for this or show and tell, but just a reminder that I'm sure you all know that Annie Ernaux won the Nobel Prize for Literature this year. One of my small presses, Seven Stories Press, is her American publisher, and they have most of the books that she's written. Her stories uncover the roots, estrangements, and collective restraints of personal memory. The 2008 book, The Years, is considered to be her magnum opus, but there are 11 more to choose from as well. Happy reading, happy holidays, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susie. That's a great list. Really, thanks for coming. And we really enjoyed it. Next, we've got Michael Kindness, our friend from Penguin Random House. Michael, tell us about some of the books you've got this year, this season.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Davith. I'm going to share my screen and do a little PowerPoint. All right, is that showing up for you all? Does
Looks
anyone
great,
see that?
Michael.
Okay, great. Okay, so first book I'm going to talk about is Liberation Day by George Saunders. Some of you may remember his novel Lincoln in the Bardo, which he got a lot of attention for, but he's always been known as a short story writer. Actually, Time magazine called him the best short story writer in English. And he is someone who always does something a little bit speculative, maybe something set in the near future or something not quite the same as our world. So even though they might be a little bit fantastical, he's always commenting on some aspect of our society today. And he's just one of the most interesting story writers that I know. And this is his first collection of stories in almost 8 years. And even if you have someone on your gift list who reads all of his stuff whenever it appears in magazines, there are actually 4 new stories in here. So there will be something new for even the diehardest George Saunders fan. Next up is a collection of poetry from Billy Collins. A little bit of a confession. I'm not a big poetry person. I think at some point in high school, an English teacher like drilled the love of poetry out of me by making me analyze things. But Billy Collins is the exception to that because his poems are so accessible. They're often funny. They may be beautiful, but they're always about something that's part of everyday life. And I think that's really hard to do, is to write something so striking about, emptying the dishwasher or something like that. What he's doing in Musical Tables is he's sort of discovered short poems. And he says, this is a quote from him: "Whenever I open a book of poems, I tend to flip through looking for the small ones. Just as I might have trust in an abstract expressionist painter if I knew he or she could draw a credible chicken, I trust poets who can go short." So he, and that's from the afterword, where he talks about why he's sort of embraced these short poems. And there's one up on the screen that hopefully you've all had a chance to read by now. Some of them are this short or even half this size. Some of them are maybe like twice as long as this, but nothing longer than that. And like I said, he's just, even if you think you don't like poetry, he's just so accessible and funny and real. I feel like he's someone I could talk to. Next up is a book that came out last year that I still love, and it is called Your Guide to Not Getting Murdered in a Quaint English Village. So my question for you is, why are small villages in mystery novels or in masterpiece theater so deadly? Like, why do like, I think back to Murder, She Wrote, and if I lived in Cabot Cove with Jessica Fletcher, I would move because everyone there dies. But what Maureen Johnson has done here, along with illustrator Jay Cooper, is given us a guide to this small village and the ancestral manor house that's on the outskirts of town. And you quickly learn that the person who runs the pub is probably not to be trusted. The person who runs the newspaper is probably not to be trusted, but definitely never, ever, ever trust the vicar. The vicar will try to kill you. It's very funny. I just want to quickly read, because it's kind of small, I don't think you can see it. The patriarch. It says, "He's delighted to see you. Come in, come in. He was just revising his will, cleaning his guns, feeding the puma, and drinking the contents of every half-empty cup in the building. Do you like deadly snakes? Come, come, you must fondle some before lunch. Mind you don't trip on the basket of knives. Who left that there? Anyway, follow him up the rickety ladder to the roof. Snakes love roofs." So you can just sort of get the sly funniness of her writing. And throughout the book, there are quizzes, so you can find out if you would survive a quaint English murder village. You probably won't. I can almost guarantee it. So this is perfect. It's only $16.99. It's perfect for friends who love mystery or masterpiece theater or just love laughing. And speaking of laughing, next up is Feel the Burn by Andrew Schaefer. Andrew Schaefer wrote a couple of Obama-Biden mysteries a couple years ago. And I think when Bernie, that picture of Bernie with the mittens was everywhere. He was like, I think I have my next subject. So the story follows Bernie as he is on a recess from Congress, and he's gone back up to Vermont to a small town called Eagle Creek, which is fictional, but like a lot of small towns in Vermont. And he is there for their like harvest festival, and it's leaf peeping season, until a body shows up. And apparently Bernie loves cozy mysteries and decides that he's going to try to solve this murder. The police think it was an accident. He's sure that it was murder. And all signs point to what is affectionately called Big Maple. So the big corporations that run all the maple conglomerates, the maple syrup conglomerates. So there's a lot of really funny levels to this. It's very Vermont. There are actually some recipes in there, including Vermont cheddar mac and cheese and Feel the Burn maple sriracha hot sauce. So it's very funny. It's a paperback. It's $16.99, and I think anyone would find this amusing. Next up is bringing new meaning to The Cat in the Hat. These are hats for cats. And in case you can't read the top line there, these hats are made out of cat hair. So basically, all the hair that comes off of your cat as you collect it off of your couch or your clothing or the corner of the room. The author of this shows you how to felt it. It's called needle felting, and you create almost like fabric that can then be made into these hats. Some of the hats that are in here, beyond what you see here, is Santa stocking cap, Wisconsin cheese head. There's a party hat for your cat's birthday. I think my favorite thing about this book is just the expressions on these cats. They are enjoying this, and you can tell, especially the bunny cat. That's probably my favorite picture in the book. But again, inexpensive. I feel like every book I talk about is $16.99. This one is too. It's a small hardcover, and it's just perfect for cat fans. Whether they're actually going to make these hats or not, it's just fun to look through. Next up is A Book of Days by Patti Smith, the famous musician. So she has written several memoirs. This is something a little bit different. Back in 2018, she joined Instagram and has just started posting photos. Most people post photos that they take with their camera. She has this fancy land camera, one of the classic early cameras that she takes photos with. And her photos are everything from, a detail of a building to like this person here that you can see in the corner, in case you don't recognize him, is the novelist Haruki Murakami. So a lot of it is in New York, but a lot of it is in places that she's traveled to, and it follows an entire year in her life. There are a lot of photos in here that weren't on Instagram. So even for people who have been following her or who are fans, there is some new stuff on here, and you can see there's text underneath each picture. She's written a little caption about each photo. Next up is a message from Ukraine by President Zelensky of Ukraine. This is a collection of the 16 of the most important speeches that he's given since the war began. There's a new introduction by him, and there's also an introduction by the Russia and Eastern European editor for The Economist, so sort of putting it into context. But it really gives a snapshot into what the people of Ukraine are going through, and also what an amazing leader he has become. If you don't know the story of him, he started out as a television comedian and sort of just, ended up as president. I don't know whether he ran on a lark, but basically people were like, oh, here's a comedian, he'll be our president. And then he stepped up, and he has just been amazing. And all of his proceeds from this are going to an organization called United 24, which is his initiative to get money back into the hands of the people in Ukraine who are being most affected by the war. Sticking with nonfiction, Prisoners of the Castle by Ben McIntyre. Ben McIntyre's this is probably his 6th or 7th book. He still hasn't broken out the way he should. If you know Eric Larson, who has written, The Splendid and the Vile about Winston Churchill, Ben McIntyre is just as good. He tends to write a lot about World War II, he finds these stories that have not been told before, in this case, or have not been told widely. In this case, he's looking at Colditz Castle, which was held as a Nazi stronghold prison for people that the Nazis captured. And he goes through the people who ran the prison, the people who were prisoners there. He also covers this man named Christopher Clayton Hutton, who was employed by British intelligence to create escape kits. He basically put together all these things that people could use to escape from prisons. And a lot of the people who escaped from Colditz Castle actually used things that were smuggled into them that Clayton Hutton had put together. So McIntyre does, he always does an incredible amount of research and is really good at finding things that no one else has seen before or things that people didn't think were important. So anyone you know who loves reading history, this is perfect for them. I feel like I'm running out of time. I'm gonna go a little faster. An Immense World by Ed Young. This is has already ended up on a couple best books of the year list, including the New York Times and NPR. What he does here is he looks at how animals perceive, how they sense the world. The book starts, I'm just going to quickly describe how it starts because it really gives you an idea of how good he is at explaining science. He tells you to imagine a room like a school gymnasium, and imagine there's an elephant in one corner and there's a fly halfway down the room and there's a monkey over here, and he tells you how all these disparate animals would sense each other. And it's just unbelievable. There's crocodiles, their faces, you think of all those scales, they're actually as sensitive as your fingertips. So there's just, he's the kind of science writer that makes it all so accessible and just really, really interesting. And there's a reason that it's ending up on so many best books of the year. I'm going to talk about a couple games. This one's more for adults. The Moth, which you may know from like Moth Storytelling. They have a podcast. They have competitions all around the country. This is sort of like, think like Cards Against Humanity or Apples to Apples, in that someone who is like the judge will read a prompt, and there are, I don't know if you can see here, there are themes, and then each theme has 3 different questions. People can choose to answer those questions, one of them, and the person who is the reader will judge them. There's also a couple other different ways that they include on how to play it, so it can be played with anywhere from, I think, 2 to 8 or 10 people. And then something for the younger audience, I love these illustrations so much. They're claymation. Fruits is it's sort of like a cross between gin rummy and Uno. What you have to do is you have to try to collect a good harvest, and there are things like locusts or mice that will that you can give to an opponent that will sort of devastate their harvest. But if you have a dessert like a pie or a parfait, that boosts your harvest. So it's a lot of fun. It's really simple to learn. I think they recommend ages 8 and up, and it's just so cute. And then I'm going to finish with 2 sort of cooking and drinking books. Claire Saffitz came out with a book 2 years ago called Dessert Person. She had been at Bon Appetit and had moved sort of to having her own show on YouTube. She has basically, that book blew up her popularity. And in this one, she is going a little bit simpler. Dessert Person was great, but there were a lot of really complicated recipes in here. Here, there's a lot of things that you don't even have to cook. You can put in the freezer, like this no-bake strawberry ricotta cheesecake. Obviously is really simple to put together. She has a section on essential recipes and techniques like making caramel or filling a pastry bag or poaching fruit. So really accessible, really beautiful photographs that will make your mouth water and make you want to bake something. And then the last book I'm going to talk about is Modern Classic Cocktails. So this, Robert Simonson is, he writes about cocktails, spirits, bars, and bartenders for the New York Times. He's won James Beard Awards. He's very well known. And what he's done here is he's taken classics from the last 30 years, things that were created in the last 30 years, but have endured over that time. And then he also picks some of these are the ones that I show here, which are modern classic to be. So these are things that are more recent that maybe haven't stood the test of time, but he thinks should. And the one great thing about it is that they're all easy to make. They're all 3 or 4 ingredients mostly. Most of them are 3 or 4 ingredients. So really simple. You don't have to have a huge bar to make it happen. And this one is $19.99. So still really reasonably priced and would make a great gift. I want to leave you with one piece of advice. Buy books for gifts because rectangular gifts are easier to wrap. It's just a fact. Thank you all for listening. Thanks to Northshire for inviting us, and I will turn it back to Davith.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was a great list. It's making me both hungry and thirsty. And yes, books are a lot easier to wrap than anything else, as I have been wrapping at Northshire. Up next is we've got the wonderful Nikki Mutch from sharing her books from Scholastic. And I know the first one, and it is a killer this year. I've already bought it for my granddaughter. Nikki, share us some of your books, please.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Michael and Susie. Great job. And I already have a bunch of books on my list to buy now. First, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite picture books of the entire year that just came out. And I want to show this cute little video. It only takes a few seconds. Let's see if it works.
From New York Times best-selling creators Mac Barnett and John Clausen comes the momentous debut of a groundbreaking fairy tale series. Once upon a time, a terrible and very hungry troll lived beneath a bridge. One day, the 3 billy goats Gruff decided to cross the bridge. At the sight of the first goat, the troll was already imagining his delicious dinner. But the first goat, then his brother, cleverly convinced the troll to let them cross. And the third goat? Well, he was not what the troll expected. At all. Find out what happens in the 3 Billy Goats Gruff.
I love this new series so much by Mac Barnett and John Clausen. They're going to be doing a whole series on fractured fairy tales, starting with the 3 Billy Goats Gruff. The art is just entertaining. Parents will be entertained by everything hidden in there, and kids will be too. So this is like the perfect preschool picture book gift. I absolutely love it and highly recommend it. And then if you're looking for something super traditional for the holidays, I suggest The Christmas Pine, this new one from Julia Donaldson, who's the author of Room on a Broom. So she's a favorite of preschool kids. Is just a really beautiful story about the history of the Christmas tree at Trafalgar Square and the friendship between Norway and the UK during World War II. Every year, Norway sends a Christmas tree to the UK, and they've done this since World War II to support them. And it's just such a beautiful look at friendship and love and just the joy of the season altogether. And then the Christina Soontorn To Change a Planet. I am obsessed with this book. It is so beautiful, and it's perfect to introduce kids to ways that they can change the planet single-handedly, one by one. It's a beautiful story. It's got beautiful illustrations, and then the back of the book is filled with ideas for what kids can do around their house, around their communities, and at school to help save the planet that we all live in. Forever Home, this gorgeous, beautiful, wordless picture book by Henry Cole is a favorite. And if you are a dog lover, I'm telling you, this is not just for kids. This is for adults too. I would definitely pick this up for the holidays. It's a story of a dog who's lost and has no home, and a boy who's lost and has no dog, and how they find each other. It's going to make you tear up, I promise you that. But this is also a really great companion if you're thinking about bringing a furry friend home for the holidays. What a great book to give to the kiddo that's getting that lucky gift. And then we go on to middle grade, Best Wishes by Sarah Milanowski. Sarah Milanowski is the author of Upside Down Magic, so you're already familiar with her. This is a new series that she's going to be co-writing with a bunch of new and up and coming middle grade authors. So what it's about is a little girl who finds a box, and inside the box is a magic charm bracelet. She gets to make a wish on that charm bracelet, and the wish may or may not come true exactly how she hoped it would. And then she'll pass the bracelet on to another kid. So think Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants for a middle grade crowd with more of a touch of magic. Very sweet, very adorable, perfect for 8 to 12-year-olds. Speaking of 8 to 12-year-olds, Natalie Lloyd is back. She's the author of A Snicker of Magic, a staple now and definitely a favorite of kiddos. This beautiful book, Hummingbird, is her most personal book yet because it's slightly based on her. Natalie has a brittle bone disease, and she grew up with that and not being able to go to school with the kids because she could get hurt easily and have to have multiple operations. And this is that story. This is the story of Olive, who's been homeschooled and has begged her parents to finally start middle school in a real school. And her parents have decided that yes, it is time. Olive's only worry is she doesn't have any friends. And then she hears the secret story about a magical hummingbird, that if you find that hummingbird, it grants your wish. And so Olive goes on a journey to find the hummingbird because her wish is to have friends. It is so beautiful. It is so stunning. It really is that book that you hide under your pillow when you go to sleep or you hug after you finish. Attack of the Black Rectangles, also middle grade, by Amy Sarah King, also known as A.S. King, is not to be missed. Book banning is at an all-time high in the United States, and Amy King does not shy away from this. This story is based on a true story that happened at her house. Her child came home from school and called up and said, "Hey, Mom, I have this book to read for English class, and there are words blacked out, and I don't know what the words are." And she said, "Can you bring that book to me?" The book was Jane Yolen's The Devil's Arithmetic, and if you know that book, it is a Holocaust story. The teacher had taken it upon themselves to block out words that they thought their students might find offensive or harmful in some way. These words were things like the word breasts. It really was alarming to her. Amy took it to the school board, and in this book, Attack of the Black Rectangles, it's kids leading the charge. Kids finding out that they need to know the content of history so they can make sure that it never happens again. This book, though, is my very favorite book of the entire year. Be gentle with yourself. It's hard to be human. And it really, really is, isn't it? Wild Oak by C.C. Harrington is the book that not only kids will want to read, but you will want to read with the kids. It is so beautiful, a story about a little girl named Maggie growing up in the 1960s, right outside of London, and her meeting by accident a wild snow leopard that was ditched by somebody who had purchased it from a department store in London. Yes, in the 1960s, Harrods department store in London sold exotic animals. If you go online and look it up, you will see pictures of people who bought giraffes, elephants, and yes, baby snow leopards. And the horrific things that happened to them, they just would let them go. They didn't know what to do with them once they brought them home to their little London flats, and they would just go to the country often and just let them go. This is a story of what happened to one of the cats, and it is impactful, it is important, and it really shows us how important it is to tune in to the animals and their needs. Such a great book, and really great for budding activists. Now I'm going to go to every kid's favorite on our list, our graphic novels. Our graphic novels are always at the top of the bestseller list, and there's a reason for them. We make sure that we get the most diverse authors and illustrators to write them. We want stories from all over, and Invisible is no different. Think of a middle school version of The Breakfast Club with a diverse cast, and you have Invisible. 5 kids stuck in detention, having to do community service, who come together and form their own friends club. It's absolutely amazing and so much fun. And yes, there are even illustrations that are a throwback to The Breakfast Club. So for those of us who are Gen X, you're going to really love that. Christina Sonthoornvat she is just hitting all the right things. And her newest graphic novel with Joanna Cacao, The Tryout, has been on top of the bestseller list for a reason. This is actually a memoir. It is based on Christina's story of how she started middle school as a child of color in a rural Texas town. And on the first day of school, anybody who wanted to be on the cheer squad had to try out for the squad in front of the entire school. Then everyone would go back to their homerooms and vote for who made it. Talk about terrifying. Gives me all the scary feels from middle school. This book is so much fun. It is so truthful, and it really, really, really speaks to kids. And then we have a new superhero on the block. But do you know, not all superheroes have superpowers, or do they? Leon the Extraordinary comes from a town where superheroes are the norm. Regular people, not so much. And unfortunately, Leon thinks he's just a regular people. But you know what he finds out? Leon finds out that everybody has superpowers hidden inside of themselves that may not be obvious right away. This book is sweet and kind. It's great for middle schoolers. It's a big adventure. It's laugh out loud fun, and is Black boy joy. I absolutely love it and highly recommend it for your kiddos. And then this actually reminds me of one of the titles that Michael just talked about for adults. Roar Like a Lion, How Animals Can Help You Be Your Best Self. This is perfect for middle school kids. As a matter of fact, I have a copy on my desk that I open to whenever I'm having a bad day, because it shows us how smart animals are, how aware they are, and how much like us that they really are. And actually gives us pointers for how living our best lives and being our best selves. Lots and lots of fun, lots of great illustrations. This is the perfect nonfiction book, especially if you're like an auntie or an uncle and you don't really know what the kids are into. They're always into animals. Nonfiction is always the best bet. And then I have a couple for our Alice Oseman Heartstopper fans. We don't have a new Heartstopper novel out right now, but we have these two great gift books that go along with Heartstopper. One is the Heartstopper coloring book. And let me tell you, after talking to a bunch of teenagers who love Heartstoppers, the reason why they all wanted this is because it is Alice Oseman's art. It's not somebody else who goes in and does the art and that you color in. Alice did all the illustrations for this. So it's Alice's art that they get to color in. And then there's the Heartstopper yearbook, which is filled with exclusive things, including an exclusive Heartstopper mini comic. It's got character sketches. It's got trivia questions for the ultimate Heartstopper fan. And it even has Alice's process. So it's really cool for kids to be able to see that, yes, someday they too are going to be a graphic novelist. Speaking of Alice Oseman, we do have a new Alice Oseman out, not a Heartstopper book, but a standalone. I Was Born for This. This great, fabulous book is all about music, friendship, and fandom. And it is about finding yourself in your place and knowing that you can like many different things, despite what your background is, despite who you think you are. There's a lot out there, and we should welcome ourselves to it and open ourselves up to it. All right, now we're getting into some YA that's very, very scary. Horror is hot. Horror is the big thing right now. Kids are watching it. They're playing video games that are horror-filled. They're reading it. I know sometimes adults get scared about buying horror books for kids, but here's the thing. Here's the reason why kids love horror. And think about it. You probably read a lot of horror books yourself when you were a kid. It's because we can face our fears safely in the middle of all of these pages of books. If you get too scared, you close the book, you put it down for a while, and you walk away. It's a really great way to find out who you are and find your inner strengths. So I highly recommend that if your kids love horror, support that and buy horror books for them. The first one, The Honeys, ages 14 plus, is so much fun. The story is about Mars and his twin sister, Caroline, who dies right at the beginning of the book. I'm not giving anything away. It's literally on the first page. She dies in a really horrific way, and Mars has to figure out what happened to her because she turned into something otherworldly at the very end. And he knows it has to do with this special private, swanky private school and a group of cliquey girls called the Honeys. And he decides he's going to that school and he's going to figure out what's going on. It's so good. It's such a great read, and I highly recommend it, even as an adult read if you like horror. Speaking of great books that make adult reads, The Whispering Dark, I absolutely loved this. The story of a teenage girl who is deaf, who gets accepted to this very private school that deals with the paranormal. Here's her secret. She actually can hear, but she can only hear people in the other dimension talking. So ghosts, spirits, people who have already passed, and she has the power through their speech and through being able to hear them to bring them into the present. It is dark, it is atmospheric, it is absolutely delicious. And then I have one of my favorite horror reads of the entire year, The Gateway by Lamar Giles. This is so good because it's like a half beat away from happening. The story takes place in a town in Florida. The entire town is a resort. Does that sound familiar at all? A Florida resort town? Everybody who lives there ends up working at the resort. That's just what you do. And Jay gets his very first job at the resort, and he thinks he's excited. He's like, this is awesome. I've got my first job. I'm going to be able to save up for a car, until he accidentally overhears something. And what he accidentally overhears is the world is actually coming to an end thanks to climate change. This resort is only for the wealthy, the famous, the highly influential. They are all moving there. They're going to seal off the town from the rest of the world, and everyone in the town has to spend the rest of their lives catering to these rich and famous and powerful people, unless Jay can make sure that doesn't happen. It is such a great look at social justice, at racism, at capitalism, at just about every ism that you can throw at him. It's there, and it's really powerful. And then the last couple books I have, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, finally out, the illustrated edition. Just so you know, we just got bad news. This is Jim Kay's last illustrated edition for us. So we're going to be working with the illustrator that he worked with to complete this book, Neil Packer, for the next two. So they might be coming out hopefully a little bit sooner. You won't have to wait 2 or 3 years between books, hopefully anymore. But it is out, and it is beautiful, and it is glorious. And if you have the other 4, you're going to want this one as well. And then the last 2 books I have are Klutz titles, new Klutz titles. The first one being Lego Race Cars. This is perfect for Christmas Day. Again, if you're hosting family, get this for the kids to play with. It's got all the Legos they need. You don't have to buy extra Legos. Everything is included. It's got a 3-foot racetrack. And I imagine there are going to be some really fun videos of kids and adults playing with this. And lastly, super cute embroidery. Crafts are still at an all-time high, even though we're, kind of pulling out of COVID or whatever we're doing. They're still at an all-time high. And one of the biggest crafts during COVID was embroidery. Still hot. This is $22.99 for 8 different projects. You can make all 8 projects for that. If you go into Michael's, you can barely buy 1 project for $22.99, let alone 8. And again, this is something that I think is going to appeal to beyond its ages. It's 9+, but really it's going to be a lot more than that. And that's all I have. Thank you so much, and happy holidays to you all.
Thank you so much, Nikki. And thank you so much, everyone. This has been a real pleasure this evening, and just a real charm. And thanks, everybody. And have a wonderful evening.
Yes, you can find all of these titles and many more at northshire.com, and also check out our lineup of January events and come back and join us for another event soon. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great night.